Hi Quilty friends, welcome back. This is month 7 of the block of the month, the 2021 block of the month. We're going to make 2 blocks this month, just like we have been making. We're nearing the end of that process though, and one of them is applique and one of them is traditional piecing. But before we get started with the block, I want to remind you that this month, if you bring in before November 15th, when you pick up your next block, if you bring in all your blocks and that shows that you're all caught up, you not only will get to put your name in the prize bucket, but you will get a prize. So if you're not caught up, think about getting caught up, because as we near the end of the 2 blocks a month, we're going to be making more blocks a month. So you really need to get caught up. Okay, what we're going to make, it's called a bleeding heart. I don't have one completely finished, but what you have in your packet is you have a square, and that square is perfectly cut to 6.5 by 6.5, so you do not need to trim it, and it's this turquoisey color. Okay, that's your background. And the other thing you have is you have a piece of white, a strip of white, and you have a strip of green fabric as well. And then you have 2 strips of what's called Fuse Me. What it is fusible web. And if you touch it, you can feel it's papery on one side and kind of rough on the other side. And the other side, the rough side, is what's sticky. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to trace the pieces that we need onto this. Okay, you have 2 pieces of this. One is wider. The wider piece you're going to trace the corner onto. Okay, and if I were you, I would trace 5 of them if you can fit them. So be careful and try to get 5 corners onto your piece of Fuse Me. And then the narrower piece, that's hard to say, is for the petals. And the petals are going to go onto the white piece of fabric. Okay, so how to use Fuse Me. Okay, the first thing is onto here I want to trace, and I'm going to trace, you should trace 5 petals as well. And all you do is you put it down over the piece, and then you use a pencil and you trace. And I like to use a pencil so that if I make a mistake, I can erase it. Okay, and I just trace like this. Now, if you have a hard time seeing it, you have 2 other options. The one option is to hold it up to a window. Okay, you can just tape this to the window and then hold your piece of Fuse Me over it, and you'll be able to see it. The problem with that is we've had really gray weather lately, so if the sun isn't out, it doesn't help a whole lot. The other option is a light box, if you own a light box. Okay, so you're going to trace 5 of these onto your piece of Fuse Me, and I think your piece of Fuse Me is bigger than this. This was just a scrap that was left over. Okay, after you trace your 5 onto there, then you take and you're going to fuse the entire piece onto here. And to fuse it, all you do is hold your iron on it for a count of about 4. And then lift the iron and move it and count to 4. Okay? And then you can tell it's fused. Let it cool. And after it's cool, you just cut it out on your pencil line. Okay, and when you cut it out, you end up with these pieces. And see, there's the paper on the back. Okay, and I have 2 more of the corners as well with the paper on the back. Okay, so now we're ready to sew them on here. And this process is called applique. Traditionally, a lot of people will use what's called a satin stitch. And a satin stitch is the zigzag done very, very close together. And I'm going to be real honest, I've never had much luck with it. The only way to get a really perfect satin stitch is to own a machine embroidery machine, and then you will get beautiful satin stitches. But on a regular sewing machine, it can be very difficult. So an alternative to that is what's called the blanket stitch. And I don't know if you can see this, but the blanket stitch, it's a straight stitch along this edge, and then it takes a bite over. Okay? Now, almost any machine that has the capability of doing any kind of decorative stitch or zigzag has a blanket stitch on it. So you'll just have to look on your machine and see if you can find it. On you might have a lot of choices as to a blanket stitch, but you might only have one choice. But here's what a blanket stitch does. Okay, if I'm stitching, it's a stitch and then a stitch over, and then it comes back, and then a stitch over, and it comes back, and a stitch over, and it comes back. Or you might have an option to go 1, 2 stitches, a stitch over and back. 1, 2 stitches, a stitch over and back. 1, 2 stitches, a stitch over and back. Okay. It doesn't matter which one you use. It's up to you. That's why I had you do 5 of the corners and 5 of the white petals, so that you have an extra to play with. Okay, so you can fuse that to a scrap of fabric that you have at home, and you can play around and see what you're more comfortable with. But here's another option. If you only have one option, you probably have this one. And what I want you to know is you can play with the stitch length and width to make it seem better or worse, well, hopefully better, okay? If it's worse, you don't want to do that. Okay, but here's what length and width control. The length controls this. So you could make it longer and a stitch over and back, and a longer stitch and a stitch over and back, and a longer stitch and a stitch over and back. Okay, so what the length controls is the distance between these bites. The width controls this, how long this bite is. So if you make the width wider, you've got the length longer, and now the width, it'll be much longer and back, much wider and back. Okay, so length controls the distance between the bites. Width controls how far in the bite goes into your piece. Now the pieces that you're going to be doing are really kind of small. So my guess is that when you just turn it to the blanket stitch, turn the knob or press the button or whatever, that might really be okay. The settings that are there might be just fine. Try them first. If you're having trouble controlling it, then you might try to make this smaller, so the stitch length a little bit smaller, okay? Or the width a little bit smaller. My guess is you will not want to go bigger. Okay, the other thing is I would have the same color thread as the piece that you're appliquing, okay? And by that I mean, in this case, the green piece and the white piece. You don't want to match the background, you want to match the piece that you're appliquing down, because see, the bite is going to go onto it. And you don't, if that's a contrasting color, then if you make any little mistakes, all the irregularities will show. Where here, it doesn't matter, they're not going to show. All right. The next thing I will tell you is if you try it on a scrap and you're seeing that it's pulling the fabric, bunching it, or when you look on the wrong side, it's not laying flat, then you might need to put a piece of stabilizer underneath there. The other thing is you might play with your stitch width and length, and that might help, but a piece of stabilizer will help. And so if you have that problem, if you come into the shop, we have stabilizer that you can buy a small piece of, right? Because you won't need very much. So if you have trouble with that, then come and get some stabilizer. All right, what the process is you fuse this. What I did is I fused this one down, and then I stitched all the way along there, and then I fused this one down, because see, these actually overlap slightly. So now I've appliqued this one. So I'm ready to put this corner on. So I'm going to take this paper off. That's probably the hardest part of applique, is to get the paper off. But this paper peels off, and what you'll have is a piece of fabric that is now fusible and will stick down to this background piece. Okay, somebody told me if you take a pin and score it, it'll... I should have started this before the video. There it comes. Like I said, I think this is the most challenging part. As you start to pull this back, you want to make sure that you have fused this to the piece and that you can feel the It won't feel sticky, but it'll feel different than the back of the fabric, and this will feel real shiny like wax paper. Okay? So now see it, there's kind of a sheen to it. So the sticky is on there. So all I do is I line this up exactly with the corner. Okay? And then I'm going to take it over here. And usually you will not get any sticky on your iron because it's not bigger than the piece.
If you do get sticky on your iron, we have a product that will clean your iron very easily.
Yes, it's called Iron Off. So if you do get some sticky, the other thing is you can put a pressing cloth over this. Okay, let it cool a minute, because if you lift it right up, then it's still warm and it won't stick. So let it cool. When it's cool, now see, it's stuck to the piece. So now I'm going to stitch here. All right. I had my machine set up. All right, and I like, as you can see, there's lots of different variations on this machine. For blanket stitch, I like this one, number 7. Okay, so, and I found that, oh, I don't have green threading, but that's okay, because you'll be able to see better. Okay, this is actually white thread. All right, now what's going to happen is the bite is going to go to the left, okay, because it's going to do it just like it shows it here. Okay, so what I want is my straight stitches along the edge of the green fabric and then a bite over. All right, what you want, now I have white thread in here, so you're going to be able to really see it, but what you want is the green thread to match, so that if you're not exactly right on the edge, or your bites aren't quite evenly spaced because you don't turn it correctly, then you can really see that when you have a contrasting color thread. So you're really going to want to have green thread that matches this green fabric.
That's going to go forward too.
What?
Your stitch you have, it's going to go forward too and then over.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, the stitch I've chosen, it's 2 stitches forward and then a bite over, 2 stitches over and then a bite forward. And I suggest you sew very slowly. Okay, it always, this machine gives you a little time before it starts doing the, okay, now what I'm doing is I have the open toe foot on so I can really see what's going on, and I'm watching that the needle is going right at the edge of the green fabric.
Is the needle going into the green fabric?
No, it is not going into the green fabric. Okay, and now I really need it to turn a little more, so I can stop it and pivot it a little more. The other option is on this machine. I can set it so that every time I stop, the presser foot automatically goes up. So now as I'm around this curve, the minute I stop it, the presser foot goes up so that I can pivot it a little more. But if you don't have that option on your machine, it's not a problem at all. You can just stop it, raise the presser foot, pivot it. And the reason you want to keep pivoting is you don't want to have to pivot so much at one point that the bites are look like they're pointing at each other. You're trying to keep the bites perpendicular to the straight stitches. Okay, so I'm going to do this whole one, and then I'm going to do the last one by overlapping it slightly. Okay, and as you see, I am sewing very slowly. And you want to do the pivot when it's going to do a straight stitch. You don't want to do the pivot when it's going to do a bite. Because see, the bite goes over and back, and if you pivot won't be right together. The other thing is, I told you this does 2 stitches in between, and what's nice about that is it's easier to pivot it because you've got 2 stitches to do that on instead of 1. So if you have that option of 2 stitches in between on your machine, you might find that a little easier to use just one stitch. Okay, we're in the home stretch here, and notice I really am sewing slowly. That's really the best way to applique is to sew slowly. Okay. There we go. Nice clean edge. But as I said, if I were you, I would suggest that you use green thread. All right, now we're ready to put a petal on. We really should do this other one, but we're not going to. We're just going to put a petal on. And to put a petal on, the important thing is it needs to be pretty much in the middle of this. So if you fold this like this, you can find where the center is. Now that's where this bottom point's going to go. Now, the other thing you have to realize is you need it to be here and here at least 1/4 of an inch away from this edge, because when you go to sew this square into your quilt, you're going to sew at 1/4 inch, and you don't want to cut the edge of this petal off. So you need to make sure that you're at least 1/4 of an inch away from the side here. Okay, so again, we do that little thing where we have to get the paper off. Somebody told me if you score the paper with a pin, it's easier, but I guess I just prefer to struggle. You think I should sew this with white thread, Megan, or should I change the thread color so they can see?
Probably change it.
Okay. All right, let's put this on, take a quick break, and we'll be back. I'll get this fused on and some contrasting color thread so that you can see, because we need to talk about the points. Okay, we're back, and I've got the piece fused down. Okay, and as you can see, it's nice and stuck there. All right, I'm going to leave my setting the same because that worked really well as far as stitch width and length. But if you have a harder time with this, then feel free to play with it until you're comfortable. Okay, this has a couple more challenges. Here, we didn't have to do anything about the thread ends because they're going to get caught in the 1/4 inch seam. But here, we are going to start in the middle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I have both my threads nice and long. So I'm going to pull my bobbin out, and I'm not going to cut it off in here. I'm just going to do it the old-fashioned way where I lay it over, and I'm going to bring my bobbin thread up. Remember, needle down and up one time. And there's my bobbin thread. And now they're both here, and I'm going to put them underneath and behind my presser foot. So now they're nice and long, because what I'm going to have to do is push them through both to one side and tie them off when we're done. But we'll deal with that when we're done. But we have to deal with this part at the beginning. So we have nice long bobbin threads. Okay, now, don't let the corners make you crazy. As far as where the bite is, the only thing that's important is that it doesn't go into the green. Okay, if it ends up being along this edge, the bite, as we turn the corner, that's okay. If it's at a funny angle, or if they form a little V, that's okay. What we don't want is for the bite to end up going into the green area. So that's what we're going to concentrate on. Okay, so I'm going to put my needle down. Now, because I've already done this, I don't exactly know whether I'm at the bite or if I'm at the edge. I suspect that I'm at the bite. I don't know why, but we'll see.
Hold on, did you use the cut button?
No.
Oh, okay.
If you use the cut button, does it go back to the...
It resets itself.
Oh, well, I should have used the cut button then. Okay, I was right. I was at the bite. So now I'm back to being at the edge of the fabric.
You can usually, if you've done this long enough, you can usually tell by where the needle is if you have some idea. Okay, so now we're heading up. This curve is pretty much the same as the curve we just did. So you shouldn't have any trouble. If you did okay on those corners, you shouldn't have any trouble doing this. And if you have a nice foot like this with an open area, it's easy to see. Again, I would not be using this black thread. I would be using white thread. But I did this so you could see what happens.
When we're all done, I'll take you on a tour to the other side of the classroom and show you the finished block so you can see what she used.
Matching thread.
Yes.
All right, we're approaching that point. We're just going to keep going straight. Sort of straight. There's a slight curve here. I don't want to curve there. All right. This is hard to talk and do this at the same time. Okay, so now I can tell I'm going to have one. Okay, I think I can get my other stitch. Now what I'm going to do is line this up so that my bite ends up being right along this edge. That won't always happen. Okay, and now I'm going to turn the corner and come down this way.
That was masterful.
Yeah, I can't believe that happened. That doesn't always happen that nicely. Now we'll see what happens with this other corner, which is a different corner. Okay, that turned out pretty good too. I actually think I could do one stitch this way. Yep. And now I have one more stitch.
The odds are in your favor today.
Yeah, they really are. I should go buy a lottery ticket. Okay, but what you have to do is you have to be paying attention, like 1, 2, and over, 1, 2, and over. You have to know where you are in the pattern in order to decide what to do. Okay, 1. Okay, I'm not quite ready to turn. I'm going to let it take one more stitch. Okay, now I can either angle it so that it goes and it'll kind of touch that one, or I can do it so it does it along that edge. Since that's what happened over here, I think I'm going to do it so it does it along the edge. Okay, now it's going to go right back to where I was, and now I've got my 2 straight stitches. 1, 2, over. Okay, and we have to finish because I have to show you what to do with your threads. Okay, speaking of those threads, I'm going to go and I'm going to take and pull these threads off to this side so that as I come around here, I don't get these threads tangled and stitched over. This mostly just takes patience because you really can't sew quickly. So if you're a heavy-footed sewer, this may not be your favorite technique.
What's cool about it is you can use almost any shape. You're not limited to straight lines and gentle curves. You can have corners and
Right, and perfect circles if you want. And so it is a neat technique. It's really, if you're artistic and you can draw anything and then cut that out and turn it into an applique. I can't draw, so I have to go online and find a picture because I am not a artist. All right, we're closing in on the end here. And I'm going to let it take one straight stitch. All right, now, I don't want to use the cut button, so I'm going to raise my presser foot and my needle, and I'm going to pull it away so I have these long threads, and then cut the threads off long. Okay, now, I take and pull this through to the wrong side, and the way you do that is you jiggle this thread a little bit till you see a loop, and I see the loop right there. Only I don't have a pin or anything. You need one pin. Hang on. You can use a pin. You can use a seam ripper, but you got to be careful that you don't cut the thread with the seam ripper. What you've got to do is find this little loop that's this thread is going through that I'm pulling on, and there's the loop. And you pull it through, and now I have both the bobbin thread and the top thread on this side for my beginning, and here's my end. This one's harder to see because they're a little more jumbled together. Just keep working it. I'm going to pull out one stitch so that I can. Okay. There's the loop. Just barely starting. There it is. I had to pull on the other side a little bit. Okay. So now I have all the threads down here. I'm going to tie these two together. These are my ending ones. Really got long threads. I was really generous here. Okay, I'm going to tie it once, and I'm going to tie it again, but this time I'm going to take it through. I'm going to take my thread, I'm going to double loop it through. Okay, that's that one. This one, I'm going to tie these two together. And again, I'm going to double loop it the second time. Okay, now you don't just cut these off. You're going to take a needle and thread them onto a needle, which you don't need to watch me thread a needle here forever, but once I get them threaded on the needle, we'll try it, see if I can do it the first time. Oh, I got one. Oh, I got two. No, I only got one. Well, we'll do it with one. If you can get both threads on there at the same time, it's faster and quicker. And then I'm just going to take and go underneath these stitches. For a little extra assurance, and then you can cut it off. Okay? Cut this off. I'm going to do the same thing with this thread, take it underneath, and then these two will go this way. And then your threads are tied and kind of wound underneath, so you shouldn't have any trouble with them coming undone. Okay? Now, Megan will take you over there and show you what the nice finished block looks like when you have this same colored thread.
I'm going to zoom in on the... See, there's the block in the finished quilt. And it's got similar color, it's got same color thread. So that's what you're going for. Okay, everybody, good luck. We'll be back with your second video.